Hey everybody, I'm Jack with Future Pastimes. I'm a designer on Dune-themed games and expansions, and I'm the designer on Ecaz Nexus, which is the third expansion for the 2019 edition of the classic Dune board game from Gale Force 9. One of the variants in that expansion is something called Nexus cards, and a Nexus card is drawn by a player who is not in an alliance at the end of a Spice Blow and Nexus phase in which there was a Nexus, and there is at least one alliance between other players. And the idea here is to incentivize players to not get into an alliance and try to win solo. And there is a Nexus card for each faction of the 12 factions. So there's 12 cards, and you use all 12 of them. It doesn't matter which factions you're playing with. But when you draw a Nexus card, each one has 3 different effects. And the effect that you can use is going to depend on which factions are in the game and which faction you are. So there is a betrayal effect if the faction that matches the card is in the game, but it's not you. There's a cunning effect if you draw your own Nexus card. And then the secret ally effect is if that faction is not in the game. So there's only one effect that you can possibly play depending on who you are and which factions are in the game. And once you play it, it's discarded, so it's a one-shot effect, but nobody knows which one that you have, so it can be a nice little surprise, and that is hopefully what is going to give you the edge to help you to win solo. So let's take a look. We're going to break down in this video the Ecaz Nexus card. So Ecaz is one of the new factions from Expansion 3. So we're going to look at the betrayal effect first, and that is if Ecaz is in the game, and it says under betrayal, cancel an Ecaz advantage to help you to understand that that's only applicable if they're there for you to play the card on. So the betrayal effect is anytime before shipping a movement, if Ecaz and their ally both have forces in a territory, force the Ecaz ally to return their forces from one territory that contains both factions' forces to their reserves. Now, one of the advantages that Ecaz has is something called Occupy. And that means that Ecaz and their ally can be in the same territory, and they count as essentially one faction when they do that. So it doesn't block a stronghold. And in fact, if Ecaz and their ally can be occupying together 3 strongholds at the end of a game turn, then they win. So it's a little bit like an alternate win condition. Normally, an alliance needs to have 4 strongholds, but if Ecaz and their ally are both in 3 strongholds together, then that fulfills their win condition. So this betrayal effect is going to slow them down. The other thing that they get out of that Occupy advantage is if they're in a battle, Ecaz decides which one of them actually is going to fight the battle in terms of using a leader or playing treachery cards. But irrespective of who is fighting the battle, it's Ecaz's allies' forces that get dialed, and the Ecaz forces are going to be counting half of their strength there rounded up to the battle strength overall. So if they have 4 forces, they're going to be adding a +2. And in advance, they don't need spice to count at that full strength. So it can be very hard to dislodge Ecaz and their ally because they are both essentially contributing force strength to that battle. So this is a nice way to boot them out, slow them down. It's done before shipping and movement, so they can still ship down, but they may have been counting on using that turn to get themselves into 3 strongholds together, and this may prevent them from being able to do that. So can be a very impactful effect, especially if that ally has a lot of forces, because they've paid to ship them down, and now they're going to have to pay again to reship them down. Next, onto the cunning effect. So this is if Ecaz is playing and they draw this Ecaz card. Now, there's a rule that if you draw your own Nexus card, you may immediately discard it and draw another one. And that rule exists because a couple of these cunning advantages are really only applicable to advanced games. So if you're playing basic, you wouldn't be able to use that cunning effect, but you can discard your own Nexus card whether you are playing basic or advanced. So it gives you an option to maybe get something else, but some of the cunning effects are pretty good. So let's take a look at this one for Ecaz. They may gain Duke Vidal for this turn, even if he is captured in the tanks or a Gola, overriding the Moritani advantage. At the end of this turn, set him aside normally. So another thing that Ecaz has going on for their faction is Duke Vidal, which is a 6 strength leader with no trader card. Now, they don't have access to him normally. The only way they can get him is if they use the Ecaz ambassador token and somebody triggers it. Then they can get Duke Vidal, and they have him until they use him in a battle. Now, if Moritani is also in the game, they too have a Duke Vidal advantage, where they gain control of Duke Vidal if they are in battles in at least 2 strongholds, not counting any battles with House Ecaz. So, and their Duke Vidal advantage normally overrides the Ecaz one. So if the Ecaz has triggered the ambassador, they have Duke Vidal. But by the end of shipping a movement, it looks like Moritani is going to be in 2 battles with other factions, and they take Duke Vidal from whoever has him. And so that can be a big deal for them. But this overrides all of it. So they get him. And it's a nice way you can revive him for free, although they can always revive Duke Vidal, and only Ecaz can do so. But it's nice you get a free revival, or if the Tlilaxu are in the game and they have revived Duke Vidal themselves and made him into a Gola, the Ecaz can't steal him away. Moritani can. So it's interesting because Duke Vidal is a character from some of the prequel books. He was kind of a sneaky character. He was in cahoots with the House Moritani, even though he was an Ecaz Duke. And his aspirations were to run House Ecaz, overriding the Archduke. So I wanted to have a way for both factions to be able to use him. But this can be very handy for Ecaz if they choose to keep this card. Finally, we go on to the secret ally effect. And this is typically meant to work as if you were in an alliance with that faction. But here, you're in an alliance and nobody knows about it. Still only a one-shot effect. But this one is not quite like what the Ecaz alliance ability would be. It didn't really quite work out because it has to do with their ambassador tokens, among other things. So this effect is force one player to reveal whether or not they have any of your leaders as traders, though not which leaders. So it's a little bit of information. You can play it on any other faction, and you can play it at any time. And then at least you'll know if your leaders, if all of your leaders are safe, or if perhaps one of them is not safe. So it's good to know if, like, oh, I'm playing it on Atreides, is your trader one of my leaders? And if they say no, then you know that you can use any of your leaders against Atreides. Maybe use it on Harkonnen. They're going to have more traders, but if the answer for them is no, that's going to be great for you. And if the answer is yes, then yeah, you've got something to be worried about. You have extra incentive to avoid getting into any battles with House Harkonnen. So that is how the Ecaz Nexus card works. If you've had a chance to use Nexus cards, let me know in the comments what you think of them. If you've had the chance to use this one, let me know any of those effects, if you remember whether or not they had an impact on the game. I surely would love to know. I'm a big fan of Nexus cards. I'm terribly biased, but I did like the idea of people not necessarily wanting to jump straight into alliances at the first opportunity. I think the game is more interesting, especially when you have a mix of, well, there's an alliance here, but these players are not in an alliance, and that can be a fun, refreshing take on a game of Dune. So there you have it for that one. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you again soon.